Shalom. First thing and foremost, I want to give all praises and glory and honor that's due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect. Who is in the gospel abroad, lifting up the standard of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, wherever it may be. This is just a real quick lesson going what is called, once again, Between the Testaments. Just some more information from this King James study Bible here, which is very, very good information, has a good commentary in it. A lot of the historical facts they got on point, but the spiritual aspects and breakdowns, Esau goes off because he doesn't understand the spirit of this book, but he does have the archaeology and the historical facts on point, which that's researchable. Basically, man, I'm just going to get into a couple of things on the Apocrypha, nothing too deep, things we've all learned and studied, but just a refresher. How the old Protestants rejected the Apocrypha. Okay, the Protestants, they rejected at a point in time because they felt that it wasn't canonical, because they felt that it didn't have any reference to the Old Testament. But in fact, that's a lie. Because if you go into 2nd Esdras, the 14th chapter, it goes into how Moses was set by the Most High for a particular season to get the understanding and the breakdowns of the beginning and the ends of times. Okay, like when Moses got the commandments, when the Lord set him by him for a short season, it tells you when he went into the chariot on top of the mountain, he got the understanding of the beginning of the book and the end, which you have the first 5 books of Moses, which is Genesis, Deuteronomy, Exodus, Numbers, and then you have you got Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, you have Numbers, and then you have shit, I'm tripping. First 5 books. Let me get that. I'm tripping, man. Long day, Salakia. Let's go to the beginning. Salakia, give me a second, brothers. Yep, Leviticus, Numbers, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, Leviticus, Exodus, and Genesis, which is the first 5 books of Moses. So the Apocrypha is indefinitely canon, and I'm gonna do a second part to this video with the screen recorder, because basically you can link precepts from the New Testament to the Apocrypha. In fact, Yahweh Shai quoted a lot of similarities from the Apocrypha. Okay, and we can get a couple of those precepts as well going into the New Testament, and that's why a lot of times scholars refer to they call it the New Testament Apocrypha. Okay, but if you go into the 1611 King James Version, and in fact the Catholics, which they actually didn't approve of that particular version of the Bible, but if you look at the version of the Catholics in the Bible that they use, is in fact the King James Version, and the Apocrypha is right in the middle of the book. Okay, and I actually have a 1611 King James Bible that's put up in is in my storage, but it has the Apocrypha right in the middle of the book. So without further delay, it goes into it. This is Between the Testaments, and they go into the chronology of the historical facts on from 612 BC with Nineveh being destroyed by the Medes and Babylonians, in which that's actual history. You can go into the history of that. You can go into the book of research, the book of Jonah, and the historical facts of who ruled at that particular time in those empires, and you will find the history that they was destroyed by the Medes and the Babylonians. Okay, you can go into that. They got Jerusalem destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, which is 587 BC. And then you have Cyrus inherits the kingdom of Ashan, the beginning of the Persian Empire. And then you have Babylon falls to Cyrus, the end of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Okay, and this is all historical facts, which shows you that historical facts and documents line up with biblical prophecy. Okay, and this is how you understand the Bible, through the prophecies. Okay, and you take the facts of what happened, and then you compare it into the timelines of the Bible, and that's how you get your historical facts, which you Christians, you will never understand that, because you don't understand the history of the scriptures. Okay, you got 530 to 522 BC, which is Cambyses succeeds Cyrus in the conquest of Egypt, and then you got Darius I, which is the ruling of the Persian Empire. Okay, and then you got the Second Temple, which is completed by the Jews in Jerusalem. You got Xerxes I, which attempts the conquest of Greece in the time of Esther. Then you have what they call the Greek naval victory at Salamis, which Xerxes flee. Okay, then you got Artaxerxes I rules Persia age of Nehemiah, and then you got Alexander of Macedon, which conquers the east, and Seleucids, which conquers Babylon. The beginning of the Seleucid dynasty, you can read about that in the First Maccabees, which links the Apocrypha to Bible prophecy, which shows you that it's all canon. You see, the reason why Esau removes the Apocrypha from the Bible, and he stated that it was a non-canonical text, is because the prophecy it contains and it mentions Alexander the Great by name before his time. Okay, and if you go into the book of Daniel, when it goes into the time of the Greeks, basically, and you have what they call the Diadochi Wars, you have the Ptolemaic Wars between the Seleucid dynasty, and then you have Ptolemy. That's mentioned in Daniel, I believe, the 11th chapter, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, which shows you that the Apocrypha is definitely canon with that history. And that's what Esau, he tries to avoid, because another thing too, he took the Apocrypha out is because the Apocrypha tells you in great detail on how the Israelites were Hellenized and how they became Greek, okay, how they become under the Greek philosophy, so to speak. So he wants to confuse you, because when you remove the Apocrypha, you can implement what they call replacement theology by adding other ethnicities into who the Greeks are. You see what I'm saying? So that was a clever way that Esau Edom did to try to incorporate his birthright back into the kingdom. But that's not how the Lord set it up. You understand? Because when you are missing the gap between the Apocrypha and the New Testament, then you don't really understand how the Greeks became Hellenized or the Israelites became Hellenized. That's one main reason why he removed it. And that way you can play with it and you can put your own, which replacement theology, which you Christians, you delve deeply in, and you fail miserably to prove or disprove what we're saying. With that missing history, you can just add your folly in there, man. And that's one of the reasons why Esau Edom doesn't really want to deal with the Apocrypha. Okay, but we going into how the Greeks, matter of fact, Alexander the Macedon, this is clearly in the Apocrypha. Okay, and then you got Antiochus III, the great, the Seleucid ruler of Syria, and then Antiochus III defeats Egypt, gains control over Palestine. Okay, when you go into the kingdom of the north and the kingdom of the south. Okay, then you got Antiochus IV, Epiphanes, which ruled Syria, and they says in Judaism is prescribed, which they go off in that aspect of it because we didn't profess a religion called Judaism. That's New Age shit. Okay, but nonetheless, you had what they called John Hyrcanus, which explains the holding of the independent Jewish state, which a lot of those Edomites claim to be Jews at that particular time. Okay, and then when you go up, you got Matthias, which this is in the Apocrypha. It says his sons rebelled against Antiochus, the beginning of the Maccabean revolt, and you can read about that in First Maccabees. Okay, when you had the Maccabean brothers that went against the Greeks at that time, Antiochus, which is of the Seleucid dynasty, because what happened was a lot of Israelites started to keep the feast of the heathen, and this is part of or the beginning of the Hellenization period, which you have in the New Testament, which when you take the Apocrypha out, there's a missing link there. So you be like, oh, how the fuck these people become X, Y, and Z? Well, you got to have the Apocrypha because the Apocrypha is basically history. Okay, but they try to write it off as being canonical text because they say, well, it don't line up with the Bible, but it does because actually when you go into the Apocrypha, matter of fact, we'll go back there. You got what they call the rest of the chapters of Esther, okay, which are neither found in the Hebrew nor in the Chaldee, because you have to understand that you had what they call the Septuagint, which is the 70 that was written in Greek, okay, and they acknowledged the canonical text of the Apocrypha, okay? So a lot of the things that wasn't prescribed in the Hebrew writings, you had it in the Greek, okay, which they believed in the Apocrypha because those were the Israelites, you see? So anyway, let's go back to First Maccabees, the first chapter. Matter of fact, nope, we're going to go to the fourth chapter because a good prototype to link the Old Testament or the Apocrypha to Yahushua, it was when you go into the book of John, I believe the 10th chapter, when it goes into the Feast of Dedication, which is the Feast of Hanukkah, or Chanach, as we pronounce it, the dedication, which goes into the defeat of Antiochus, and we're rejoicing and praising Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. It's an 8-day period. Okay, and actually we kept our Feast of Chanach last month, I believe around towards the middle or end of November. I believe like it was around the 21st, if I'm not mistaken, or matter of fact, I think it took place in the middle of November and it ended like around the 21st, 22nd, or middle of that week. I can't recall, but we did observe it, which in the scriptures, it tell you that it took place in the wintertime. Okay, so it makes a sense on how these books link up. You see? But anyway, finishing on, you have what they call Simon the high priest founds the Hasmonean dynasty. Okay. Judas is the Maccabees leader. Jonathan is high priest. You can read about that. Onias as well. Simon the high priest founds Hasmonean dynasty. John Hyrcanus explains the wholeness of the independent Jewish state. Okay. You can connect the Hasmonean dynasty to John Hyrcanus as well. It says Ashtabula's rule. Then you have Alexander Jannaeus rule, and some Salome Alexander rules. Hyrcanus II, the high priest. Then you have what they call the dynastic battle, which is Ashtabulus II and Hyrcanus II. Then it goes into Pompey, which invades Palestine, and then the Roman rule begins. Then you have Hyrcanus II rules subject to Rome. Antipater exercises increasing power. Then you have the Parthians, which conquered Jerusalem and established Archelaus II as high priest, and King Herod the Great, son of Antipater, rules as king subject to Rome. And this is all historical facts between the Testaments, and Esau knows this history. Okay, so it says the Apocrypha. The term Apocrypha is used to designate a collection of ancient Jewish writings that were written between about 250 BC. It says the early Christian centuries, which those Christians are actually Israelites. It says the apocryphal books have come to be regarded as inspired scripture in the theology of the Roman Catholic Church. But the history of the Protestant and Jewish viewpoints ascribe no real inspiration to them. But in fact, the Apocrypha is indefinitely canonical with the Holy Scriptures, man. Okay? Because if you go here, it says why Protestants reject the Apocrypha. It says why Protestants study the Apocrypha for a light it throws on a life and thought of the pre-Christian Judaism, which there was no Judaism. It says they reject it as inspired scripture for the following reasons, which they go off on this shit. This is Esau's bullshit reasoning, but I just gave you the true reasoning on why he had rejected it. Okay, because if it was not canonical, it wouldn't have been in the 1611 King James Version. Okay, it says while Protestants study the Apocrypha for the light it throws on a life. I read that. It says the apocryphal books were not part of the Old Testament of Jesus and the early church. It says the threefold division of the Old Testament, the law, the prophets, and the writings still used in Hebrew Bibles and Jewish versions of Old Testaments does not include the apocryphal books, and never. It says never did while the Apocrypha was known to Yahushua and his disciples. They never quoted from it as authoritative scripture. But in fact, that's bullshit, because if you look at some of the quotes that Yahushua, we'll get into that in the next video, but a lot of things Yahushua quoted was precepts out of the Apocrypha, and we can prove that, man. We can get precepts from the Holy Bible and from the Apocrypha, linking the two. Shows you that they had profound knowledge of the Apocrypha. And if they didn't believe it, you wouldn't have what they call the Feast of Dedication, which is going back into Hanukkah. Okay, the feast we just observed, not even a whole month ago. Okay, it says ancient Jewish writers who used the Greek Bible, notably Philo and Josephus, were acquainted with the Apocrypha but never quoted as scripture. But in fact, Josephus stated that nothing has been added to scripture from Artaxerxes into our time. But this is where they go, and this is where they contradict themselves, and this is how they know. It says the apocryphal books from Second Esdras, the second chapter, mentions 24 books corresponding to the Hebrew Bible as it is known today, but 70 other writings that are historic in nature, which Second Esdras 14 and 44 through 48. It is significant that this apocryphal book shows an acquaintance with the acknowledged Old Testament canon as known in the synagogue and in the Protestant churches. Okay, which basically they tell you that it's canon. Okay, and to prove that they know, they even mention the books here, the books commonly termed the Apocrypha. First Esdras, Second Esdras, which it'll be Second Esdras, Third Esdras, etc. It says Tobit, Judith, additions to Esther, Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiasticus, which is Sirach, Baruch, Letter of Jeremiah, Prayer of Azariah, which prove that you have the Prayer of the Three Holy Children, which basically goes into when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was thrown in a fiery furnace. That's in detail in the book of Daniel, I believe the 3rd chapter. So how the hell can you say that it's not canon when they reference the Old Testament there? That's actually a story in the Old Testament to show you how this devil works. But it says Wisdom of Solomon, Baruch, letter of Jeremiah, which Baruch was actually a scribe and an understudy of Jeremiah the prophet. It says prayer of Azariah, Susanna, which you can equate the book of Daniel in the time of Susanna because he was the judge, which Daniel goes into the Hebrew word Dan Ya'ala, which means he is a judge of God. Um, Daniel actually was the judge between those two men that tried to falsely accuse Susanna of basically adultery, man. Okay. And it says here, Bel and the Dragon, the prayer of Manasseh, first Maccabees, second Maccabees, which is totally history, man. Okay, so Esau, he gets slick with it, but nonetheless, through the spirit, Yahweh Shai has given us the understanding. And like I said, this is just between the testaments because I found that the study Bible is rather interesting because they give you history and breakdowns on historical facts, though they go off on certain things. But a lot of the information is on point because, peep this, it says Yahweh Shai charged for blasphemy. And this is verse 22, John 10 and 22. It says, as it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication. Okay, we just read about that in the in between the texts. It says the feast of dedication, and it was winter, and Yahweh Shai walked in the temple in Solomon's porch. So when you go down here, John 10 and 22, the feast of dedication celebrated the cleansing of the temple by Judas Maccabees after the desecration by Antiochus Epiphanes in 165 BC, and it began on the 25th of Keslev or Chislev, November through December, okay, and lasted 8 days. It said it was called Hanukkah for dedication, okay, and we just kept the feast last month in the winter. And what proves that, you come here to First Maccabees, the 4th chapter, and you can go all the way down. Matter of fact, we can go. We can start at verses. The whole chapter is really good, but we can start down at. Let's start at verses 44. And bear with me because the writing is small. I'm trying to do this the best I can while recording. But it says, and when they consulted what to do with the altars of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it's best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach unto them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down. And you can go into how they defiled the temple in the 1st chapter of Maccabees. Okay, when swine's flesh, man, we had to sacrifice different gods. They took the goodly things. Okay, they put Israelites to death. We had to keep the customs of the heathen. Okay, they're just a few bullet points there. But it says, and laid up the stones in the mountains of the temple in a convenient place, Salakia, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them. Then they took the whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former. And they made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple and hollowed the courts. It says they also made new holy vessels into the temple, and they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and the incense to the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlesticks they lighted, and that they may give them, or that they may give light to the temple. It says, furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 5th or the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Kaselu, okay, and we just read that here in the pretext down here. They call it Chislev or Kislev, but when you mention it here, it pronounces it different, but it's the same thing. Okay, it says in the 148th year, rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice to the law upon the new altar of the burnt offerings which they had made. And it says, and looked at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, even that was it dedicated with songs and cisterns and harps and cymbals. Okay, so that was basically us cleaning the temple and giving dedication. Okay, and it says here, then all the people fell upon their faces in worship and praising the Most High of heaven, who had given them good success over the Greeks at that time. It says, and so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. And it says, and they decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that reproach of the heathens was put away. And it says that moreover, Judas and his brothers with the whole congregation of Israel ordained, okay, that the days of dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the fifth and 20th, or from the 5th and 20th day of the month of Caselu, with mirth and gladness. Okay, so which proves that Yahweh Shai knew about the Apocrypha and that it was actual canon. Okay, so that was just pretty much just a little brief history in between the testaments. Like I said, this is a dope ass study Bible, man. This is all we really, I mean, this gives you all the information you need. They break down the Essenes here. They go into the Pharisees. You got the office of the Sadducees. You have the Romans. They break into it. They go into the Greeks. They go into Hyrcanus. The Maccabean revolt, which they put it right here in the scriptures, which you can read about that in First Maccabees. Okay, so this is man, Yahweh Shai is beautiful. But anyway, I'm gonna end it there, giving all praises and glory and honor that's due to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, Bashim Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, peace and blessings and salutations to the hopeful elect. And with that, shalom. Stay tuned for part 2. Just gonna link up some precepts from the Old Testament, well, the New Testament, in the Apocrypha, showing how Yahweh Shai, a lot of the quotes he quoted was actually indeed in the Apocrypha, man. So with that, shalom and a baba.